AstroPy. Now, a few years ago, if astronomers wanted to use Python for astronomical data analysis, they had to download and install a separate package for it, a separate kind of operation. For example, you'd need a library called PyFits to deal with FITS files, PyWCS to deal with world coordinate systems, AtPy or ASCII table to handle tables. Then there would be a whole bunch of cosmological calculators. There would be some coordinate transformation tools, each one sitting on the respective developers' web pages. You would download and you would install. Now the problem in this was soon realized was that each of these developers would have used different approaches to make the package, which means that the overall syntax, grammar or approach or philosophy of design would differ from each package. So the user would have to take up the headache of adjusting to each developer's approach to doing something. So the solution the astronomers realized early on was to unite all these packages under one common banner, and that banner is what we call AstroPy. Now, AstroPy has several features, of which I'll be touching upon 4 today. I'll spend almost half of my talk on table management, that is loading and writing tables, handling FITS files, and then a basic WCS or world coordinate system calculations, and then cosmology. So before I begin, I want to show you this web page, which is the main web page of the AstroPy project. And under this, now there are basically 2 types of packages in AstroPy. One is what is called the core AstroPy package. So which means if you pip install AstroPy, what functionality you get is one aspect of AstroPy. The other is packages that are working under the banner of AstroPy but are not part of the core package, which means you need to install them separately. So on this web page you will also find a list of affiliated packages which takes you to this page. So these need to be installed separately, but they try and adhere to the standards of AstroPy. So you get the similar user experience that you get in AstroPy. So there's Montage Wrapper, which is a Python interface to the program Montage, which allows you to make mosaics. There's Ginga, which is a basic GUI widget for viewing FITS images, and you can heavily customize it as per your choice. So for example, if you were an observatory engineer who needed to design your own FITS viewer, customized to the specific nuances of that observatory, you would take Ginga as a starting point and then build upon it. Then you have APLPy, which allows you to layer things like regions or contours on top of images like you are allowed to do in DS9, except that this is much more powerful. It can be called within Python, and you can use Matplotlib as a basis to layer other kinds of vector graphics on top of FITS files. Then you have several other packages. You have AstroML for machine learning related stuff. You have AstroPy6, I hope that's the correct pronunciation. Now those of you who are trying to migrate from IDL to Python would find this useful. As it says here, it's a library of IDL routines converted to Python. Then you have AstroQuery, which allows you to use Python for querying online databases. And these are relatively new packages. They are not perfectly stable, but sooner or later there's a chance that one or more of these will become a part of the main AstroPy package. So currently you need to install them separately. Eventually it will become a part of the core package. So this is the web page for the AstroPy6 project, and I leave it to ideal users to try and correlate the one-on-one mapping between ideal packages and the corresponding Python ones here. I'll spend a few minutes right away on us. Yes.
There used to be this ideal Astro library.
Yes, I think a good deal of that is now present as AstroPy6. Okay, so I'll come back to AstroQuery a bit later on after I cover the first part of the talk today. So we'll start with tables. So no matter what analysis you do, be it what wavelength, eventually after doing the hard work, in the end you usually end up creating tabular data and analyzing it. So that's an essential part of astronomical data analysis, which is to handle tables. Now if we chose to stay behind by an year, we wouldn't use AstroPy, we would use two modules called ASCII table and AtPy. But today we'll use, these are a sub-module within the AstroPy package, we'll see how to use that. Now AtPy and ASCII table, other than a few minor bug fixes, are no longer being developed. But I'd still recommend that you install them on your machines, because there might be other packages or programs which have not been edited by the author to adapt AstroPy but are still based on these two. So you may not be able to run them if you don't have these two modules installed. So do keep them installed, but try and use astropy.table as much as possible. So the counterparts of these two in AstroPy are astropy.io.ascii and astropy.table. So what is the difference? I mean, why two modules for handling tables? Well, you will only use one, which is astropy.table. Because astropy.io.ascii is a very low-level ASCII file parser. So it is a generic program designed to handle as many variations as you can in ASCII tables. For example, I might choose to use tab delimited ASCII files with a header, and I might choose hash as a comment sign. Somebody else might use % as a comment sign, and so on. So to accommodate for all these differences, the astropy.io.ascii was developed. Astropy.table is a higher level library. It uses io.ascii to handle ASCII files and a bunch of other libraries to handle VO tables or FITS tables and so on. Now, so when do you need to use io.ascii? Well, when you try and load a table with this, and for some reason you have chosen to work with an ASCII table which this module is unable to recognize, then you need to go through the documentation of this and try and feed extra information to help it understand your file. So I'll give you an example of that soon. So now in order to use the table package, the table sub package in AstroPy, you need to know what classes are. Now since we are not covering object oriented programming, this is something we are not going in depth, but I'll give you a brief overview of what classes are. So we've been dealing with objects right since the beginning. We've been dealing with int objects, float objects, string objects, list objects, and we all know what objects are by now. They are basically chunks of data which have well-defined behavior. They have certain functions or methods attached to them which allow you to work with them, perform various operations. So think of a class as a piece of code that governs this behavior. So if ints behave in a specific way when you divide one by the other, then what is it that determines that ints should behave this way? For strings, this operation should not be allowed at all, and for floats the behavior should be different, and for complex numbers it should be different. So you can now imagine that there are classes for each of these, which is a collection of code, and that tells you, or that tells Python how that particular object will behave. What we want to do now is we want to take the tables in the form of files and load them as special table objects in Python. So first we need a class which can create those objects or define the behavior of table objects. So that's why the first step in any program that uses AstroPy's table module is to have this statement. What I'm saying here is from astropy.table import table. So table is not a module, it is a class. We use it almost like a function sometimes, but it is a class, and a class has, since a class defines objects, even a class has methods like objects have methods. So table has a method called read, which we will use to read the file from the hard drive and load it into the memory. Now you see a warning here. It's specific to my machine. I'm using a bleeding edge version of one of the libraries here. That's why it's warning me that, look, we haven't tested this module for this version. You may encounter problems. So these kind of warnings can keep coming frequently because there are way too many modules that are internally used by AstroPi. So you can get such warnings. So long as your user experience is not trashy, you shouldn't worry about the warnings. Okay, so to load the table, I'll start by defining a variable that will point to the table object, and I'll say equal to table.read, the name of the file I want to load, and the specification of the format. Now for ASCII files, it is almost compulsory that you must include this statement. If you are loading a FITS table, since you do not expect FITS tables to have any other extension but .fits, you can skip this format equal to FITS at that time. It will directly recognize a FITS table and load it. Same goes for VO table, which either has an extension .vot or .xml. Okay. Now at this point, when you write this statement and your table doesn't load, what do you do? Well, the read method that we have called internally calls the read method of astropi.io.ascii. So all the arguments you can supply to io.ascii can also be supplied to table.read. And some of them include like header start. This should be a 1. It has appeared as a semicolon here. That's a 1. So here I'm telling Python that my header is on the first line, my delimiter is a pipe, and there are a whole bunch of other options. I can specify what is a comment symbol. So how to recognize comments. If you're using %signs, for example, you can say comment character equal to % or something like that. So if you run into an ASCII table that is not loading, then you need to go into the in-depth understanding of io.ascii's options. Okay, so once we load a table, one of the primary things I'd like to do is check out whether the table has loaded. A simple way to do that is just issue this command, which is print demo table. So in this case, I have a table with 10 rows and 4 columns containing name, observation date, and the magnitudes in B and V band. So that's it. The table has been loaded. There are other ways of printing the same table. I could also say demo table.pprint. It gives you the exact same result, except that pprint is a method, which means you can supply various arguments to it to control the output. So you can specify whether you want the unit to be shown, whether the column name should be shown, what is the maximum width that your table should occupy on the screen. So if you say 60 and your table is larger, it will truncate a few middle columns, give dots to indicate that there is some data in it, and try and display the entire table, and so depending on what you are trying to do with this function, you can use one of these options. For example, if I say show name equal to false, I get a table without the header. In case for some reason you need to transfer the table without heading for some other program, it's trivial to remove the headers this way, or you could directly edit the file, whichever. There are other ways to print these tables. You can also say demo table.more, or which will, so let me show you how that works. Okay, so I can say demo.more, and this is an interactive display of the table, and there are these options at the bottom. If you say H for help, you get an explanation of what these keys do. So you can go forward by one page, back by one page, next row, previous row, go to beginning, end, or quit browsing, and so on. Okay. So this other option, as it says here, this will open a browser, the default browser on your computer, and it will display HTML version of your ASCII table. Okay. Then you can quickly check some basic properties of the table you have just loaded. You can check the length of the table by using the same built-in len command. You can get the column names in your current file. So this is one of the few things that this is one of the first things you do, because it may happen that your column names are not detected properly by AstroPy. This can happen for various reasons. Even if, say, one of your rows contains some missing data or something like that, and you are using space or tab delimited files. Now if you have comma separated, the moment I see 2 consecutive commas, I know that there is a missing entry. But when I am putting spaces, it's not trivial to count the number of spaces and say, okay, there is missing data here. So you should first check that your header is being read correctly, otherwise something has gone wrong. There's something wrong about at least one line in your file, and that has prevented the table from loading normally. If you're loading fits tables or viewer tables, they have well-defined metadata sections in it, and that can be accessed by saying demo table.meta. Okay, so let's see how we can access the data from our table. If you wanted to access an entire column, that you would do it almost more or less like you do with dictionaries. Here the column names will be equivalent of keys, and the output will be the entire array of numbers stored in that column. So if I say print demo table name, and get only the name column here. If I want more than one column, I'll just give a comma separated list. So it's a name, comma, MacB, so only these 2 columns appear. Now for rows, if you wanted to access a single row, you would say print demo table 0, but you would get a very awkward output here. I don't know if this has been fixed in the very recent version of AstroPy, but if you want to get a clean representation of your row, you have to do some roundabout things. So one way to do it is demo table 0.data, for example. That would give you a tuple of all the values sitting in that row. Or you could do something very roundabout if you wanted a pure string representation. I would ignore this if I were you, because this is hardly needed in analysis. And you can always say, you can always join these strings very easily and construct a string representation yourself. And maybe this problem doesn't even exist in the latest version. I haven't had a chance to check it out. So maybe this will be more than enough to display whatever row of the table you want. Again, counting begins from 0. The same NumPy convention / list convention is valid here. You can combine these 2 syntaxes and access individual elements. So if I say demo table name 0, that gives me the entry in the first row for the name column. This does exactly the same thing. So I can access it either way. I can tell the row number first, then the column name, or the column name first and then the row. But if you know Python inside out, you should be very curious as to how this is even possible for AstroPy to do. Well, that's because deep inside something interesting happens. When you say demo table name, first a column object is created, and then the 0 accesses the first element of that column object. Whereas when you say demo table 0, a row object is created, and that allows you to access the name part of it. So deep inside there are actually row and column objects at work that allow you to use this syntax in this way. So now you know how to access rows and columns. You can subsection tables very easily. So if you wanted to subsection a table as follows, you just want to take 2 columns and put them in a separate table. That's it. You know what this means. All you need to do is put a variable name and an equal to sign, and you can grab that part of the table and store it separately. Same with rows. You can also access rows in this way. So this will access the 2nd, 6th and 4th row of that table, and in that order. Or you can combine these 2. If you wanted a bunch of rows and a specific columns, you can combine the syntax. And once you know how to access elements, if you say equal to this, you are capturing them. If you say equal to on the right hand side, you can change them. So if I say demo table name, I am referring to a column which has 10 entries. So on the right side, I can either choose to provide a single value. So what happens is every element becomes that same value here, or I can give it a list or an array of 10 elements, and then in that case there is a one-to-one mapping for each row. So the first element becomes the first row and so on. So let's see an example of that. So I'll just showing you what the table looks like. And if I give a statement that says demo table name equal to X and print it again, you see all the names have been changed to X. I could have given something like X1 to X10 in a list, then it would have changed X1, X2 in that way. If you tried something else, it would give you some kind of error, probably what is called a broadcast error or something like that, which it's trying to say that I cannot broadcast what you have asked to input into this because of the shapes not matching. How do you add new columns? Counter question, how do you add new keys, key value pairs to a dictionary? If you say take a dictionary and refer to a key that does not exist and give it a value, what happens? It will create a new pair. If you give it an existing one, it will change the existing one. Same is applicable for table objects as well. So I'm directly saying, I'm directly creating a new column called new column. And I'm just saying it should be a list which contains numbers from 0 to 9 because the length of demo table in this case is 10. So I get a new column which is from 0 to 9. Now while this is very flexible, a key problem with this syntax is that the columns will always become the last columns. So if I were to add another column this way, it would get added here. So if I actually want to add a column somewhere in between or at the beginning, let's say, I would have to manually construct a column object and use a method called add columns to do that. So let's see an example of that. So for that I'll import the column class. Just the way the table class is used to create table objects, the column class is used to create column objects. So the way that works is I'll first create an object called new col, and I'll say column, and I'll call column as like a function. So classes can be called like functions, and that accepts two arguments. One is what is the data and what is the name of this column. And then, having created the column this way, I can say demo table dot add column, and I can supply this column object here. This can't be a array. This can't be a list. It has to be a column object. That's why I first did this step where I created a column object using an array, and then I'm also supplying the index at which the column should be placed. So index equal to 0 means it will become the first column, and that's what happens. The new column, as the name I have given here, becomes the first column. Okay? Is that okay? Fine. Any questions about this? I mean, what kind of data do you want to input? Yes. Sure. So you just make a list of float numbers and you would say data equal to whatever that list is. So this part here can be any list, any array, or even a tuple for that matter. So just like in life, it's easy to destroy than to create. Same is the case with Python columns. It's easier to destroy them. You just have to say remove columns, make a list, and we'll give a list of all column names that you want to remove. And you can see that the columns are gone. Removing rows would be okay. This is remove row in case you can't read it. So demo table dot remove row 5 removes the 6th row. 5, 6 removes the 6th and 7th row. Now the problem is, if you want to remove an entire slice, because this is a function call, you can't give your user syntax of 5:10, for example. You can't supply that here. So there is an inbuilt function available in Python called slice, which is used for which basically creates a list of indices corresponding to that slice. So if I wanted to remove everything from index 3 to index 5, I would say slice 36 as an argument. Okay. So let's do some more stuff with tables. So I'm reloading the table because I've made some changes to it. So I'll load the table afresh. This is what our table looks like. Now if I want to sort the table, I just have to say demo table.sort, and I have to give a list of keys or column names on which the sorting has to be done. So what this statement means is I want to sort the rows on the basis of names. But should the names be same for a bunch of rows, internally I want those rows to be sorted by B magnitude. And if B magnitudes are also same somehow, either you will need to supply a third one, or it will use a first come first serve kind of an approach. So whatever it encounters first, that will be kept first. It won't do any sorting if it encounters a tie in MacB. So if you see the output, you see that name has been sorted in this way. Internally, you'll see that MacB is in increasing order. Okay. Now, as of the version which I am using, there was no straightforward way of doing reverse sorting. So I honestly expected I could say comma reverse equal to true, so it would do a descending sort. It doesn't do that, but thankfully, once you sort the table, you can say dot reverse to actually achieve that effect. So you sort in ascending order, and then you reverse the table and you get a descending order sorted table. Not a convenient way of doing things. I hope that has changed in the latest version. Okay. You can also group rows based on some criteria. So, for example, in our particular table, we have entries for an object called M101. I would like all those rows to be marked as separate groups. And then, why would I want to create groups? Because eventually I want to work group by group. So I don't want to compute the mean MacB of the entire table. It doesn't make any sense. It would make more sense to calculate mean magnitudes for one object. So first operation is I would like to group by object name, or by the name of the source, and then I will perform group wise aggregations on them. So to do that, so once again I am loading the table. I create a new table called the group table, which is created as follows. I'll say demo table.group by, and I'll give the name of the column which I want to use for the purpose of grouping. Then the group table will have something called an object called groups, which is like a list, except that the index, it accepts an index and it gives you the one entire group. So if I say groups 0, it gives you the first group that it has discovered. So this is the first group it has created. If you say 1, it will give you the second group, and so on. Now if I want to do group wise operations, I would use something called the aggregate method. So I'm importing NumPy because I want to use NumPy's mean function to calculate means of each columns group wise. So I'll say group table.groups.aggregate, and I'll supply NumPy's mean function as an argument. Once again, to remind you, if I just write the name of the function, I'm referring to the object. The moment I put parenthesis after the name of the function, I'm calling that function. Remember that subtle difference. So I'm actually supplying the function as an object or as an argument. It gives a warning here. It says that I cannot calculate mean of this column called observation date. because in this case it's a string. You can't calculate mean of a string, of a collection of strings. So it gives, so in the final output, it leaves out that column, takes all the other columns, and now you have mean B magnitude and V magnitude for the 3 sources. Fine. You could also remove groups which satisfy or do not satisfy some criterion. But this is a bit non-trivial in the sense that you first have to define a function which is called a filter function. That function compulsorily must be designed as follows. It should accept 2 arguments. The first argument should always be a placeholder for the table object that will be supplied to the function. The second argument will always be the something called key columns, that is the column that was used for creating the groups. So if I wanted to filter out all groups which did not have a positive mean of a certain row, this is what I would do. I would say define positive mean, table key call names, and I'll say if numpy.mean of this entire column is greater than 0, return true, else return false. And if I say t positive mean is group table dot groups dot filter, and I supply this function as an argument, what does it do? It takes each group of rows, creates a table object of those rows, and passes it to this function. If this function for that particular group of rows returns true, it is kept inside t positive mean, else it is not kept in t positive mean. So you can filter groups of rows using this approach. Any questions on this? So there is a lot of other things you can do with, there are a lot of other things you can do with the AstroPy table module. You can take 2 tables, you can vertically stack them, you can horizontally stack them, you can do a proper join like you would do with 2 SQL tables. But that I'm sort of leaving it up to you to go and explore on your own. The documentation is straightforward. Okay. So now I'm moving to a different topic, which is handling of FITS files. Are there any questions on tables? Okay, so just in case you feel that there is far too much material being covered at too fast a pace, I have to show you something here. I want to show you the AstroPy user's manual. This is not a developer's manual, it's a user's manual. It is not meant for people who want to write extra code in AstroPy, but actually just use it. This is the number I want you to pay attention to. It's a 1219 page manual. Well, let's remove a few pages, the copyrights, huh? Where? No, this is the authors. Authors are the AstroPy developers. So it's not that it's for the AstroPy developer. Yeah. And just to show you just to give you an example of how fast AstroPy is expanding, when this was 0.3.2, this count of pages was 900. So whatever new functionality has been added has resulted in the manual expanding by 300 pages. It is expanding at that rate. So there is no way I can cover all of this. So I have no choice but to give you an overview of what is available, what is the general approach in using these modules, and it's up to you to refer to the manual and build on top of that. Okay, so let's see quickly how FITS files are handled in Python. Again, few years back we'd be talking about a library called PyFits, but today that is now a submodule called astropy.io.fits. So the first step is to import the submodule. You would say from astropy.io import fits. That's your first step. in case you already have code which is based on PyFits, you can just take the first line of that code where it says import PyFits and just replace it with this statement, import astropy.io.fits as PyFits. It will work through. Since the AstroPy is movement is led by the people who designed the PyFits and PyWCS, those two modules have not changed much. Okay. Now I want to load a fits file on my machine as a object in Python. To do that, I'll say HDU list equals fits.open and the name of the file. So all of you know what HDUs are. So a fits file has what are called extensions, which can store, let's say an image cube, for example, would store multiple images in a single fits file. So the file name 0 would be the first extension, file name 1 would be the second extension. Now every extension has again two parts. There is the header, which contains metadata that describes what kind of data is stored in that extension, and the data refers to the actual array or whatever which contains that data. So if you're talking about images, it's a 2D array. There is an extension, there is a header which describes that array. What are the units? What are the header keywords which describe the solution for laying a world coordinate system on top of the image, and so on. So again, fits file made of extensions. Each extension can have a header and a data part. So HDU refers to header data unit. So it refers to a single extension in the fits file. So when you say fits.open followed by the name of a file, it creates a list of all the extensions that are found in that fits file. So now HDU list is a list of extensions. Even if the file contains just one extension, it will still create a list, which means you still have to say HDU list 0 to access that extension. To quickly check the basic information about the file you have loaded, you can say HDU list.info and it gives you some basic information about all the extensions in that file. So here there is only one extension which is named primary, and it has 184 header cards. So each entry in a header is called a card, and then you have the dimension of the data and the format in which it has been stored. If you want to access the header, you will just say HDU list 0, so you will refer to the first entry in the list of HDUs that fits.open has discovered. When you say header, you get an entire listing of all the keywords and their values in that header. So for example, this is number of axes in that file, the length of the first axis, length of second axis, and so on. These headers are more or less dictionary objects. So if you want to access a particular keyword of a header, you would simply say dot header, and in brackets within quotes you will give the name of the key that you want to query. So this gives you the value of n-axis 1. You can, I said it's almost a dictionary because unlike dictionaries it also supports this syntax. So if you give it numbers, it will give you the first, this will give you the second entry in the header, the key value pair. So only the value, sorry. But it's also, again, it has features like a dictionary. So if I say header.keys, I can get a list of all the keys that are there in the header. I can get a list of all the values and so on. Now if you wanted to change the values, you would do it the way you would change the key value in a dictionary. So if I wanted to change n-axis 1, for instance, I would say header n-axis 1 equal to whatever new value I want to give it. Of course, it's a very bad example because even if you give a new value to n-axis 1, when you save a file in PyFits or astropy.io.fits, internally it will make sure that your data matches n-axis 1 and axis 2 and a bunch of keywords. So it has a inbuilt safety protection. Even if you screw up and give the wrong value of certain keywords, standard keywords, it will make sure that you are giving the right ones, and it will change them automatically. Okay, so I can plot the data that is there in this. So this is the command I use in IPython to tell that, oh, I want to go into pure interactive plotting mode. And then there is a command called imshow, which accepts a two-dimensional array and treats it as an image. So I have passed the entire data to imshow, and I have done a log transformation to it. Because linear scales, and you cannot view them properly, so I have just done a log transformation and I get the image here. Now here is a confusing slide. How many of you have actually dealt with FITS images, opened them, viewed them in DS9 or any other image viewer of your choice? Okay, how many of you have done low-level operations with images, like even extracting a subsection of an image by loading them as an array? Yeah. So you'll be aware that depending on the language you're using to read the file, if I say data 5, 5, sorry 5, 10, and if I load the same image in DS9, does it refer to 5 and 10 or 10 and 5? Each language has a different convention for it. And the reason this is important is because when you load a two-dimensional array in a language, now by definition an array is a continuous collection of memory blocks. But when you load a two-dimensional array, either the rows are continuously loaded and the second row follows after that, or the columns are loaded continuously and the next column follows that. So depending on whether you are reading the image row-wise or column-wise, your speed will differ. That is why you have a nomenclature like fast access and slow access when we talk about images as arrays. So fast access is the one which is stored continuously in memory, and the slow access is the one where the program would have to jump over memory blocks to access. You can feel the difference, right? If I have to read like this and so on, that's slower, but if I read like this in one continuous go, that's faster. That's why they call it fast and slow access. Now PyFITS has its own convention of what is fast and what is slow. There are rules, I could have listed those rules, but even if you read those rules 10 times, you would still not understand them. The easiest thing, the simplest piece of advice I'd give you is load your image in DS9, take your cursor to any pixel of your choice, read the value, load it in PyFITS in an interactive shell, access that and compare the values. If they match, it means you have understood what the DS9 convention and the PyFITS convention is. I can have an entire slide which tells you the exact transformation between a DS9 pixel and a pixel as defined in a data array. But I can promise you that you can read it 10 times and still not get it. But you load the file once and do a comparison, it will become a part of your muscle memory. Okay, so if I wanted to write FITS file, so far I have been talking about loading existing files. If I already have, so if I have loaded a file and made modifications to it and I wanted to write it back to the hard drive, I would just take the HDUList object and say .write to and the name of the file, right? But if I want to create a file from scratch, define my own header, define a completely new data and create a new file, I would first create what is called a HDU object. Okay? For that I'll say fits.primaryHDU, the array which represents the data and the dictionary which represents the header. So data is an array, a 2D array, and header is a dictionary. Then this creates this object which is equivalent of an HDU list, and I can say .write to and give the name. So this is how you would create a FITS file from scratch using PyFITS. Questions? Like? No. Because if you wanted to take a data array and write it as a text, then the table object will allow you to do that. So one of the key goals of the AstroPy project is to minimize code redundancies across various packages. So when you have the table package to do that for you, convert a 2D array into a proper formatted table, they don't give you that facility in the fits part of it. Okay, WCS. Now again, if this is what you were writing few years ago, this is what you would write now. Functionally, they are the same. The way you would use PyWCS and the way you would use WCS within AstroPy, they are identical. So, two ways in which I can use WCS. In either case, I'll first create what is called a WCS object. So like a table object which represents tables, the WCS is a special Python object which stores the information of the WCS in a given image. So for this, I'll say it's W equals WCS dot, capital WCS and the name of the file. And I'm greeted with a whole bunch of warnings. All Python is trying to tell you is the file that you have loaded contains non-standard header keywords. So when the FITS file standard was adopted by the astronomical community, there were a bunch of keywords that were decided as the core FITS standard, which should be present and adhered to by no matter who it is on earth who creates that FITS file. But it also gave flexibility for observatories to add specialized header keywords so that any eccentricities that their data have can be handled by them. So all these warnings are telling you are, look, there are a bunch of non-standard keywords in this, be careful. Next, two simple operations. I would like to specify a pixel and I'd like to ask the question, what is the array and dec at that pixel? Or the other way around, I would like to give an array and dec and tell me at which pixel is this array and dec located. So the way I do that, let's look at the pixel to coordinates transformation first. Once I've created my small w object which now contains the WCS information, there is a method called WCS pix to sky which allows you to convert pixels into sky coordinates. So w dot WCS underscore pix to sky 1000, 2000, 1. This is the output. I could also say, instead of WCS pix to sky, something like all pix to sky. I get the same output in this case. Let's dissect all of this. Firstly, when I say 1000, 2000, am I referring to the 1001, 2001 pixel, or am I referring to 1000, 2000 pixel? Well, this number 1 that you see as a third argument is what governs how these two numbers should be interpreted. So if I put a 1 here, it means I'm counting in the natural system, human system. So this is the 1000 and 2000 pixel. But if you are using an existing algorithm that's treating your image like an array, which means the counting starts from 0, you can put a 0 here and the counting will then be from 0 onwards. So in that case, it would be 1001st pixel and 2001st pixel. Same here. Now again, what is the difference between WCS and all? The output seems same. Now, to represent the coordinate system in an image, I need to tell you a pixel, I need to tell you what is the array and dec at that pixel, and I need to tell you that, let's say 10 pixels away in a specific direction, how the array and dec will change. So to the first order, you can use a linear equation to transform a reference pixel coordinate into a nearby pixels coordinate. Okay? So when you say WCS job pix to sky, only that first order transformation is used. But if you are dealing with data that especially comes from space telescopes where your I shouldn't say space telescope, so any observatory where you have data where the telescope arrangement is such that there are spherical distortions and things like that, then you need higher order corrections to your RA and DEC values. So all does those calculations as well. In this case, you get exactly identical outputs because the information that stores the second order corrections is absent in the example file that I have chosen. But if you had a file which contained those higher order corrections, you would get two different outputs for this. This is the inverse example. I now want to convert sky into pixels. So I'll say what is the pixel corresponding to this RA and this DEC, and count the pixels starting from 1. So it tells me that this is the exact pixel location for which you have this RA and DEC. You have another useful method called calc footprint that gives you RA and DECs of the corners of the image. So if you wanted to conduct operations like does this coordinate belong in this image, this array would be your starting point. Okay, we are moving to cosmology now. Any questions on WCS? Okay. So again, needless to say, all this module allows you to do cosmological calculations like finding luminosity distances and so on and so forth. So the first step again is to import the module. So I'll say from AstroPy import cosmology. Now, if I ask you for a given redshift, what is the conversion between kiloparsecs and arc seconds? Can you straight away do the calculation? Obviously no. You first need to define or assume a cosmological model for that. So same way when using the cosmology module here, you need to import or define a cosmological model. The way that's done is if you want to choose an inbuilt option, you can check out all the inbuilt options this way. So there's a variable, a tuple called available within parameters under cosmology, which gives you 4 models treated as standard by the development team of AstroPy, which people may want to frequently use. If you are happy with that, fine. Otherwise, there are ways to construct customized models. For here's an example of code that does that. So if I can import something called flat lambda CDM, then I can say my Cosmo is equal to flat lambda CDM in brackets. These will be the values of all your cosmological parameters. The documentation will tell you in what units you need to enter these values. So either you can choose to create your own custom model, or you can choose one of these standards. The number of these standard models may have gone up in the recent versions. So let's say I decide to use WMAP 9. So I'll say from AstroPy cosmology import WMAP 9. If I wanted 5, I would say import WMAP 5. Anyway, okay, the output here has not been passed correctly when I created this presentation, so ignore these formatting errors here. So WMAP 9.h of 1.5 is basically a calculation that tells you what is the Hubble parameter at redshift 1.5. You have OD, which tells you the dark energy density parameter at redshift 3, then this is critical density at 3, and the list goes on and on. You can find the CMB temperature at a given redshift, the angular diameter distance, the arc seconds per kiloparsec co-moving, then scale factor, age, and ignoring these underscore variables, all the way from here are the actual useful functions that you can do. So I think that more or less covers every standard calculation you may want to do in cosmology. Okay. So the last part which I'll briefly cover is a very useful module called AstroQuery. So you all would have heard of services like IPAC, NED, SIMBAD, and so on. What AstroQuery allows you to do is it allows you to use a Python program to directly query these databases. You don't need to start a browser, manually enter information and so on. If you have a list of objects you want to run a query on, this allows you to do that using a simple Python program. So the installation is again straightforward. You just say pip install AstroQuery. Requires you to have these modules pre-installed. So open a IPython shell, type import numpy, astropy, request, keyring and so on, and make sure that these modules are there. Okay, here's an example they have given on their web page of how you can query an object from Simbad. So you would say from AstroQuery Simbad import Simbad, and a result table is Simbad.query this object and the name of the object. Now this result table will be an astropy table. So I can say pprint, I can turn on the units for example, and I get a astropy table that got returned by AstroQuery. And you have the ability using AstroQuery to query all these databases. You can run Simbad, Vizier queries, the dust extinction services of IRSA, MED, UKIDS, blah blah blah. You even have under development further queries for Fermi SDSS, Spitzer Heritage Archive and so on. So I would call it a pretty powerful tool because it makes gathering information on sources very very easy. Okay, I'll stop at this point. Any questions from any part of any lecture should be fine. So this is the last lecture.